Okay, we are live. Hi, everyone. I am here with Cyndi-Conway Booth, and Cyndi is a financial strategist coach. She helps women and couples get out of debt so that they can live a life that they love. So please welcome Cyndi. Hi, Cyndi.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here to share a little bit about how to manage debt and how to just really take back control of your finances. So a little bit about me. I am, like she shared, a financial strategy coach. I basically help people to pay off debt, build wealth for the future without a restrictive budget. So I focus on things such as money mindset, identifying spending habits, helping you to create a budget and savings plan, as well as identifying your overall financial goals and the strategies you need to basically create them, make it happen, and achieve them so you can live the life that you want. And so what I would love to share a little bit about today is just how to start the debt payoff journey. Andra and I really spent a little time working together on that for her personally. But I know there are a lot of people that have a lot of questions of how to just get started in that process. So I'd love to share just a little bit about what that means and how to kind of start that process for yourself. So one of the first things that I always encourage people to do is really take a snapshot of where you are at in your debt. That's the first thing that you need to do, because until you create the awareness of where you're actually at and you have hard numbers in front of you, it makes it really difficult for you to start creating that plan for yourself. And so that was one of the first steps that I took with Andra in her process, is we had to outline all of the debt, because for us to be able to move forward and really dive into what we have going on, that's really important. So once you start to identify where all your debt is, you want to write everything down. That, I think, is the most important part of it. Now, you may be an individual that struggles with just looking at your finances in general. You're not alone in that. That is something that a lot of people struggle with. One of the first things that I always suggest for people to start doing is just doing a minute practice a day of just looking at your bank account. Get comfortable with just looking at your bank account, knowing what your balance is, knowing where you stand. And that's usually the first step in just getting comfortable with looking at your finances. As you start to build that, comfort level, then you can start diving in a little bit further than that. But that's usually the first step if you're someone that has struggled with being able to even look at your finances. So one of the things that once you get your debt basically written down and outlined, we look at two different processes to really pay off debt. And the first one that we look at is a debt snowball. A debt snowball is basically where you take your smallest amount of debt and you start to pay that off first. And what that means is that all of your other debts get paid the minimum charges, but you put a lump sum towards your smallest. As you get that paid off, then that sum that you were paying moves to the next lowest card, then to the next lowest card, and then the next. So you're basically starting to accumulate money to just start really chunking down your payments. This type of method works really well for people that need that first win. That's really important for people, because we're all looking for that I know I got progress moving, I got momentum, I feel wins, and we feel successful because we've accomplished something. And so, I always recommend that for somebody that's really needing that pick me up and really needing to feel like, hey, I made a difference in my debt and what I was doing. And the second type is an avalanche method. And this is where you kind of flip the script and go the reverse way of paying off your highest interest rate credit card or loan first. And that usually tends to be the one that has the highest amount of debt on it as well. And so you start to pay that off. And as you get that paid off, then you move down the line to the next highest interest and the next highest interest and the next. And then you just start doing the same process of taking that larger chunk and just start moving it along on paying off all the other debts. And so you have two different methods that you can do. Those are the most common. Now, you may be a person where your income is a variable income. You don't know how much you're going to make. You don't know how much you're going to have extra a month. So if you're on commissions, bonuses, or if you're an entrepreneur where your month to month can vary, that's when you really want to look at when you make extra income over your current expenses, how much of that money can be placed towards your debt. So you may do more of a method of chunking versus doing one of these other methods because you have a variable income. It's not as common, but you can definitely do that method as well. So those are really kind of the methods that I usually talk to people about when they're starting their journey.
Cindy, that's very helpful. You helped me so much, I can't even tell you. I thought the snowball was the highest first, so that's kind of the way I've been doing it. When I first sat down with you, I told you that I wanted to consolidate, and you said that that's not always a good idea. And a lot of people don't realize the reasoning behind that, like you explained to me. And I was full in ready to do that because I'm that charge it princess. So can you please like explain that to them, how it can go against their credit or?
Yeah, so one of the things that we often hear people talk about is doing debt consolidation. Now, I am not a huge fan of debt consolidation only because there are so many other ways to kind of tackle your debt before you get to debt consolidation. Now, where consolidating debt, such as student loans, makes sense is so you can lump all of the payments into one if possible. But even there, you want to be very careful because you always want to keep private versus government separate. But there are programs to help you to consolidate that because it can get a little overwhelming when you have multiple payments all over the place, specifically for student loans. When you're talking about debt consolidation for consumer debt, such as credit cards, maybe, a car loan, things like that, where you're trying to lump everything together, keep in mind that debt consolidation loans actually impact your credit negatively to start. So if you're someone that's trying to buy a home or you're trying to grow your credit for various reasons, you want to be very careful with looking at that option. Also, some debt consolidations do not allow you to utilize the credit cards afterwards. They freeze them, so you cannot utilize them. If you're someone that you want to still continue to have that relationship with that credit card, you want to be careful with that as well. So, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of going the debt consolidation route only because there's so many different tactics that you can do to pay off your debt. One of the things that Andra and I worked on was, setting up a plan. When we initially talked about her debt, she was concerned that it would take her so long to pay it off. And that was her biggest concern is, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. I don't see how I can do that with my debt. And so the mapping that I did for her debt really showed the option of being able to pay it off a lot sooner than what she might have assumed to begin with, only because we were using a specific method to start chunking all of that money down month over month over month. So what may have seemed like it'd take me years and years and years to pay off, really, if you stick to a strategic plan of paying it off, you can actually do it in much, much sooner time. Most people don't realize that they can pay off within a year to 3 years in most cases. Now, again, everybody's situation is different, and you really need to have your personal debt evaluated to see what makes the most sense. But I can tell you, in most cases, if you can be in that range, that's a much more workable range than going a debt consolidation. The only time that I really suggest a debt consolidation is when somebody is so upside down in their debt that they are just struggling and they have no way to increase their income. So there's variables where if you don't do this, you're possibly considering the verge of bankruptcy. And that is something we never want to get to that point. And so, I really help people to kind of evaluate where they're at in their debt so they can make the best decision for their path and what they need to do. Also, it's about feeling confident in paying off your debt, because when you see those numbers, it can be a bit overwhelming. And so we want to help you to try and make smart decisions around that, so you can basically take back control of that and not allow your debt to control you.
I love that. And it does really add to your stress level. When I sat down to really write a list, one of the things Cindy had asked me to do was write all of my bills every month and all the expenses. And I was just surprised, like when I looked at like I pay everything online. So I was really surprised at how many things that were coming out on a month-to-month basis, like subscriptions from like 10 years ago, still coming out that I wasn't even aware, and until you really look, I mean, just taking a lot of those off was like $200 a month off the top. And I was like, oh my God, so it really makes a big difference when you go back and you look at it. It does,
Yeah,
so
I think that's why it's so important to make sure that you create a budget for yourself, so you can actually tap into where you're at with your money. And that way you don't have those extra things that might have slipped through the cracks that you forgot about. So really identifying all of that is really part of that debt consolidation and debt management part of your finances.
I love it. So you work with women and you work with couples. Where can they find you?
Yeah,
You're on
so
Facebook.
Yeah, so I live my life on Facebook. So that's usually the best way to touch base with me. So you can either reach me as Cyndi-Conway Booth, or you can reach me at Make Money Simple Financial Coaching. I have a Facebook business page, and I also have a Facebook group. And so I share a lot of tips and tricks and information in my group about just managing personal finance. But those are usually the best ways to get in touch with me. I also have an Instagram, same thing, Make Money Simple Coaching. But usually Facebook's the best way. If you have questions, or you're looking at, figuring out your debt, or you want to know if a debt consolidation is right for you, I am always happy to chat and meet with people.
Oh, that's great. Is there anything that you really wanted to add, or other services that you provide that you're interested in telling us about?
Sure. So like I said, I do, if you're a person that is stuck with money mindset, trying to figure out how to even get over the hurdle of being able to look at your finances, manage your finances, or feel like you've just had some roadblocks when it comes to managing your finances, usually the most common thing I hear is, I'm not good with money. And it's usually because you weren't taught about money. And so I spend time at providing financial literacy and education, along with helping you to move through the mindset. But I also help you on the tactical side of creating a budget that makes sense for you. I believe in non-restrictive budgets, because I don't believe we have to live on pennies to, live our life. So I like to find a way to create a happy balance between you being able to save, pay off debt, and really, be able to find that lifestyle that works for you in that process. And, I also am a licensed life insurance agent. So I help people with things such as long-term care insurance, life insurance in general, and disability insurance. So I do a little bit of that as well. And I know that a lot of people have concerns right now with, just kind of where the economy is at. Just getting checkups on your finances in this time is really important, just to make sure, one, you're either staying on track, or maybe there's some other options you weren't aware of, to really help you kind of move into that next phase of retirement land, which we are all working towards, and making sure that we are able to stay retired. That's the big thing. So you want to make sure that you're always talking to someone to get those gut checks along the way, to make sure you're on track, that you can stay retired. I unfortunately have parents that are not retired. My dad is 70, working at Lowe's full-time still. And it breaks my heart to hear, people not being able to enjoy those years of their life and still having to work full-time. So I am definitely on a mission to help my parents retired and help others to be able to stay retired so we can enjoy that time, because we work too dang hard in our life to not enjoy, that freedom to have that kind of lifestyle when we're ready.
I love that. Just one more question. When
Yeah.
I was working with you, you also told me, because a lot of the credit cards have very high interest rates,
Mhm.
you had shared with me that they're often willing to reduce it. Like if you tell them, hey, this one's offering this percent and you are higher, that, so I wanted to mention that while we're here, because I wasn't aware that they'd be so quick to lower their interest rates. So that was
Yeah,
something
no,
new I learned.
yeah. So you can always reach out to your credit cards. Now, again, this is not going to be applicable to someone like Best Buy or, a department store. They're not willing to negotiate. Like they have their sets and they have their promos and things like that. But, Capital One Visas and MasterCards, things like that, you have a little more flexibility to have conversations. And one of the things that you can do is go and look at your current cards, look at your interest rate. Do you have one that's lower than most of the other ones? You can utilize that as a leverage point of saying, hey, this credit card I'm getting XYZ rate with. Is it possible to have this card with you adjusted? But the key thing is you must have good credit history. That's very important. You must have on-time payments with them. So that way you have an established ground to be able to go and say, hey, is this something we can do? I will tell you, it's going to be hit or miss on who's willing to negotiate and who is not, but it never hurts. The worst they can say is no. But sometimes you're able to get that. I have had mine lowered in the past on certain credit cards, or if I'm going to make a larger purchase, sometimes they're willing to work with you on that. So you just have to, really reach out and just have that conversation and do that. And in my group that I have on Facebook, I do share 5 creative ways for you to pay off debt. And there is a whole do's and don'ts regarding credit cards that I do in that packet.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful that you were able to come in and share. I know that with the economy being what it is, it does put a little fear in people's minds, and people are, scared maybe about their future and what that looks like. And especially if they already have debt and they're saying, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? And, or they're wondering how they're going to pay their bills. So this is so helpful. I think there's a lot of people out there today that are afraid to ask those questions. I know I put off speaking to someone like you for a really long time, and I'd probably be out of debt if I would have did it a long time ago. So I encourage people to reach out if you need that help. She's great. She's wonderful to work with. And that's enough for me. So I'm going to leave your information below the link when it comes down. And if anybody wants to get in touch with her, she can do that. And again, your Facebook name, if you want to just say that one more time.
Yeah, it's called Make Money Simple, a guide to financial freedom.
Okay, so we're going to close this meeting. Bye, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, so you could stay. We're going to close this live. So that one went really well. Uh-oh, will be converted to when the meeting ends. Okay. So, is this still live? It says it's live.